The people who promote BDS are people who promote one state, the elimination of Israel, the failure or the rejection of the legitimacy of a national home for the Jewish people, sovereign equality. Some of that's anti-Semitism, some of that, all the factors we talked about. That's going to exist. And there's no reason for me to see that if Israel were to, I don't use the term, first of all, there were no 67 lines. The vocabulary is very important. If Israel were to determine borders, or there was an agreement, 49 armistice lines plus minus, I don't know how we're going to deal with Jerusalem, that's another set of issues. But if there was an agreement out there, the PR political warfare from the people who just don't accept the legitimacy of Israel, the 47 through 67 war would continue. And you've got now at least a dozen NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that are funded partly by the European Union, partly by diaspora communities, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, who have turned the Bedouin in the Negev into Palestinians. And so you go to the European Union, European Parliament, and you go to a session that's held by the Social Democrats, and there's a big poster out there that has a picture of Bedouins in the Negev, and it calls Stop the Suffering, it says Stop the Suffering, the Forced Relocation of Palestinians in the Negev. Well, that just combines all the pieces together. So if we solve the Israeli-Palestinian border issue in two states, we're still going to have a large effort being made to delegitimize Israel, to destabilize Israel from the inside. That's part one. Part two, however, is that, yes, we also have a problem, a serious problem. I think in some ways a unique problem, although Russia and Crimea and Ukraine sort of helping us a little bit with that. This issue of occupation. It's gone on since 1967. The majority of Israelis, 60 to 70%, continuously say they're in favor of peace. They want to change the status quo. And I think Netanyahu that is his goal in the second term, and he is moving towards that goal. I think John Kerry made it harder. It was postponed. My view is, and I'm not saying that I have firm knowledge, but I can point to all academic, you look at tea leaves and you say, I'm going to publish a paper. But I think Netanyahu had planned to go in a second term towards changing the status quo for demographic reasons, for all sorts of reasons. And I think he is still moving towards that goal. It is true, every time that the occupation, he's aware, is costly internally and externally. I cannot argue. I can't do it. Every time that there is, I go on some, even CNN on occasion, but other networks and elsewhere, and there's a visit, Obama comes to Israel, Netanyahu's in Washington, and you know what always happens. There's an announcement of a new housing settlement. So the word settlement and occupation gets out there. And all of a sudden, that becomes the focus. Nothing else is important. You can't, well, there are people who say, well, let's argue about whose land it is, and Jordan occupied it before 67, and before that it was occupied by the British and the Turks, so it's really, and it's no man's land, and it's disputed territories, and there was the Levy Commission report, and all that sort of stuff, which intellectually I can agree with or understand and agree with, but in politics it just does, you don't have the 30-second soundbite or the 10-second soundbite in order to explain that. That's not explainable. It looks bad, and that needs to be dealt with, and I think Netanyahu does understand it, and other people do understand it, but he's got to fight it out internally, and he's also got to figure out the consequences of, we pulled out of Lebanon and we went from bad to worse.
So you'd agree that, before I turn to Gil, you'd agree that
and Hamas and Gaza.
But you'd agree that the timing is bad. Timing is everything, and that poking it's bad policy. But time. But in that sense is right. Okay. But timing the announcement of settlement building, literally taking your finger and poking it in the eye of,
and putting it on the headlines again each time, so that the other issues are pushed off to the side.